I was walking home alone at night, and this is what happened to me. My name is not important. I'm a 22-year-old girl, and I live in an apartment in New York City. One winter night I had just finished my shift at work. It was about 1 a.m., and I decided that I was gonna walk home. It was only a 15-minute walk, and it was such a beautiful night out that I didn't want to waste money on a cab. Plus, I love walking at night because no one really bothers you, and you can just enjoy the peace and quiet. As I was walking, I noticed there were almost no people out. It was husme kapolo cars and the occasional person hurrying home from a late shift or a night out. As I approached my street, which was quite dark because most people on this block had turned off their porch lights to save electricity, I started getting a little bit nervous. I quickened my pace and pulled my coat tighter around me. Even though the temperature was well above freezing, I could feel my breath in my throat and I could see it mist in front of me with every word I said. I was just 3 more blocks away from home when I heard footsteps behind me. At first, I didn't pay any attention to them, because I assumed they belonged to someone who lived on my block, and they were probably just coming home from the grocery store or something. But then I heard them again. This time, they were closer. I could hear the person breathing heavily, but they weren't making any noise. They weren't saying anything. They were just breathing very hard, like they were exerting themselves. I began to get scared, because now the sound of their footsteps was matching my pace. Like no matter how fast I walked, they were keeping up with me. I tried to calm myself down and tell myself it was probably nothing, but the fear was still there. What if it was a guy? What if he wanted to mug me? What if he wanted to hurt me? All these thoughts were racing through my mind. Then I started to run. I ran as fast as I could, practically sprinting down the sidewalk. I could hear the person behind me also picking up their pace. Their breathing became more rapid, and their footsteps were pounding on the pavement. I kept glancing over my shoulder and I could see the faint outline of the person running after me, but I couldn't make out any details. I didn't dare slow down. I didn't dare look back again. I just kept running. It felt like an eternity, but I finally reached my apartment building. I fumbled with my keys for a second before unlocking the door, and then I ran inside, slamming the door shut behind me. I leaned against the door, trying to catch my breath. My heart was pounding in my chest, and my legs were shaking. I told myself it was just my imagination. There was no one there. No one was actually running after me. It was all in my head. But then I heard a knock on the door. I froze. Who could be knocking at this hour? And why would they be knocking on my door specifically? I cautiously made my way to the peephole and looked out. There was no one there. I blinked a few times, thinking I must have imagined it. But then I heard another knock, this time louder than the last. I screamed and hid behind the door. Another knock came, and this time it was followed by a low voice that sent shivers down my spine. "Hello, is anyone home?" The voice was deep and raspy, like the voice of a man who hadn't shaved in days. I didn't reply. I just stood there frozen, listening as the voice continued. "I know you're in there. Let me in." I could hear footsteps approaching my door, and I could feel the vibrations through the floor. Whatever, or whoever was outside, was now right by my door. I pressed my ear against the wood, listening intently. "Let me in," the voice rasped again. This time, closer. "Please, let me in." I could hear the sound of scratching at the door, and my blood ran cold. Was this person trying to break into my apartment? I knew I had to do something, but fear had paralyzed me. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even breathe. Suddenly, the scratching stopped, and I heard the voice again, this time right on the other side of the door. "I'm coming in," it hissed. I screamed and tried to scramble away, but it was too late. The door handle began to turn, and the door swung open. I stumbled back, knocking over a chair in my haste to get away. I could see the darkness beyond my doorway, and I could feel the presence of the man who stood there. "Hello," he whispered. His voice was right in my ear, and I could feel his hot, fetid breath on my neck. I screamed and fell backwards, hitting the floor hard. I looked up and saw the man standing over me. He was tall and thin, and his face was pale and gaunt. His eyes were dark and sunken, like those of a corpse, and his mouth was twisted into a cruel smile. "I've been looking for you," he rasped, taking a step closer. "I need your help." Before I could respond, he loomed over me, his face inches from mine. "Please," he whispered urgently, "you can help me." His voice was like nails on a chalkboard, and it sent shivers down my spine. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out of my throat. I struggled to move, but my limbs felt heavy and sluggish. It was like I was trapped in a nightmare. The man reached out and grabbed my arm, his fingers like icicles on my skin. I flinched, but didn't pull away. I couldn't pull away. He dragged me to my feet and led me out of the apartment. I didn't resist. I couldn't resist. As we walked down the hallway, I could hear the voices of my neighbors through their doors. "Everything okay in there?" One of them called out. The man paused and pressed his hand against the nearest wall, his body shaking. "Yes," he rasped, his voice barely a whisper. "Everything's fine." Then he continued on, leading me toward my apartment door. When we reached it, he turned to me and smiled, his teeth long and sharp like those of a predator. "Thank you," he whispered. "You won't regret this. I promise." Before I could respond, he pressed his lips against mine and I felt a searing pain, as if my skin was being ripped apart. Then everything went black. When I awoke, I was lying on the floor of my apartment. The window was shattered, and the wind was blowing through the room, carrying with it the scent of rain and decay. I struggled to sit up, my head pounding and my throat raw. As I looked around the room, I noticed that the door was wide open, and I could see the outline of the man standing in the doorway. He was tall and thin, his face pale and gaunt, and his eyes were dark and sunken, like those of a corpse. He was smiling, his teeth long and sharp, like those of a predator. I tried to call out for help, but no sound came out of my throat. I struggled to stand up, but my legs felt heavy and sluggish. It was like I was trapped in a nightmare. The man took a step closer, his eyes gleaming with a cruel light. "Hello," he whispered. "I've been looking for you." Tenelung. That's all I remember. The rest of the night is a blur. I don't remember much after that. I remember bits and pieces here and there. I remember the rain. I remember the mud. I remember the taste of blood. But the most vivid memory I have is of his eyes. Those dark, sunken eyes that seemed to stare into my very soul. When the police arrived at my apartment the next morning, they found me covered in scratches and bruises, my clothes torn and bloodied. I was rushed to the hospital where I received treatment for my injuries. But no matter how many stitches and painkillers they gave me, there was nothing they could do for the wounds on my soul. The memory of that night has haunted me ever since, and I'll never forget the terror that filled me. As I stood there listening to the scratching at my door, knowing that whatever was on the other side was desperate to get in, and when it finally did, it brought with it the promise of unimaginable horrors.